And you've touched on, I don't know, you may as well start it. I'm going to start the
Crack
podcast.
on,
We might include this bit in, but it's storytelling. This has come up loads recently in the professional side of what I do. The power of storytelling, how to connect people emotionally to what you're doing. You spoke about this to me before with powerlifting. People don't care about the 0.5 of a kilo, but they care about the stories. You used the UFC as an example. They are great at telling stories and getting people invested in the personalities and the people. And that's what you're doing with, and that's why probably your podcast is quite popular as well.
Yep.
People are now hearing the stories behind all these faceless people pulling weight off the ground or whatever.
Yeah.
No one gives a shit about that. No one really even gives a shit about fighting. It's exciting enough, but like it's the stories and the back and forth. But storytelling in that document piece, I've even found myself recently watching 45-minute long videos of baristas working in busy London cafes because I've developed a bit of a passing interest in coffee. Two of my friends got into coffee. It's one of those fucking wankery things. You can like, how do they make that coffee?
Yeah.
What's your puck prep like? All this stuff. And I found myself watching. I was like, why do I care about this? Because now I know all the technical words, but I'm still watching this guy do his shift. It's because I'm interested in his shift and how is he interacting with these people and like what's his story behind this. That's 100% you're banging on the head there. So people will watch a 2-hour fucking powerlifting meet of you wrapping people's knees because they want to know, like, what's Shauna like behind the scenes? Because she pops her head into the camera every now and again, and like you and Vinny roasting each other and fucking all these, like, you're all characters in this story that I'm watching now, and I'm more investment in you and the sport.
Do you know, Jordan Peterson had I can't remember, he's at fucking some panel somewhere or something, and he was talking about that, like, the world as it currently exists is so like mind-bogglingly complex. Like everyone's jobs and the things we do and having electricity and like we're sitting here with cameras around us, microphones, lights. It should be impossible that this all works without breaking, but it works. But it works because there's people that are doing jobs we don't even realize that are super complex to keep everything going. So like that, you mentioned you've now developed a bit of an interest in the way coffee's made or the artistry of coffee or being a barista. Like, that's something you wouldn't think about when you just go in and you're like, give me a caramel latte, you know what I mean? Give me a macchiato, you know what I mean? Like, this is the point. Like, we don't think about those things. We just want the end result. But it took somebody time to be the person that does that as well as they do it. And it's like one of the most remarkable things about society that we can take these things for granted. Do you know? So like that, like with powerlifting, it's the 9 lifts on the platform. That's all you're seeing. But it doesn't take into consideration the weeks and months of work and all the sessions and the thousands of reps it took somebody to go out there and do that thing. So being able to do these vlogs or these small behind the scenes videos, it just gives them a bit of a, like, you know, looking through the keyhole in at what's going on in the other room for whatever amount of time. And obviously I have to edit out all the
cuss words.
Yeah, the nonsense that could get people in trouble, and just the people being dumbasses in general, or try to cut it down to be like palatable enough and not incredibly autistic. Like, but the point is that like that's kind of part of the motivation to do it. But like also, it's fairly low hanging fruit for me to make. The timer's not working.
Didn't even start.
It doesn't matter. It's very low hanging fruit to just have somebody walk around with a camera and film stuff because it is interesting without any pomp or any additional like presentation. I don't have to do anything to dress it up. I just record it. It just gets recorded and it just gets edited. It doesn't need to be, there's nothing fancy has to be done. No one has to act for the camera.
It's not manufactured. Yeah.
Precisely, because it is in and of itself the thing to watch. And I think that's part of the fun of it. So thank you for that piece of advice many, many months ago.
Yeah, well, it's just, as with all pieces of advice, it's something that I consumed and then decided might be relevant to this situation. You touched on an interesting point there as well. Ian Grant, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you. Get that out of the way. Welcome back. Actually, the most important thing, you've recently qualified. You've not just become a father, but more importantly, you've now become qualified to talk about fatherhood on podcasts, which I think is a more important thing about having a child. Now people can't push back and say, what the fuck is this guy? I don't have a kid. Now you have a kid, so now you can say things about being a parent.
Yeah. The 5 mistakes you're making raising your child.
Yeah. Caveat, this is not a parenting podcast. This is our opinion about parenting. I don't even need to say that. But the piece about documenting and not creating, what I find really interesting about it is it helps me anyway with this idea. There's this concept of you want what you think someone's life is, but you wouldn't be willing to take what got them there.
Yep.
So when I see somebody, did we talk about tennis? We did the last time.
Yeah, I think so.
And we talked about wanting, and I had this conversation recently as well, like you want what this represents to this person. You want all of the acclaim.
We did talk about it.
That goes with that. You don't necessarily want the tennis.
Yeah.
When you watch something like that, you realize, okay, I would love to be big and strong like a powerlifter. Man, look at that. It's so fucking cool. There's fire and flames and everything's so great. My God, that's amazing. I'd want that. Why can't I have that? And you feel a bit shit. But then when you watch some of these vlogs and you're like, this dude's been in the gym for 3 hours and he's done like 4 4 reps.
Yep.
And he's sitting around and like he's all this prep to do and all this fucking, you're like, I don't know if I want that. It helps kind of balance that for you. And I also think about, you mentioned these microphones as an example. Sometimes when I'm like, somebody made this microphone, you have this little bit of an inferiority complex. Like, Jesus Christ, what am I doing in my life? Someone's actually put this together. I don't even know how to do this. But the person who made the components in this microphone probably wouldn't have any idea how to do what we're doing now.
Precisely, yeah.
Having this type of a conversation, because it's just that's the path that they have walked. And I find that fascinating, that there are literally billions of different paths that people walk. And when you step back and see some of these kind of documentary style or behind the scenes style stuff, you get a real feel for that. Like that barista, I will never work in never say never, but
never say never.
Probably never work in a very busy cafe in London as a barista. But now I can kind of get an experience of what some of that might be like, which I find fascinating.
You have a much greater appreciation for it because you got to consume that content that was made. And I think that's one of the... It's great to live in a day and age where like content is so easy to just make. Like I remember when YouTube started. I remember when it was, I think the first thing I ever saw on YouTube, some American was over for a pro wrestling show and they showed me like a snake eating a rabbit or something. Like I was like, no fucking way. You can watch this shit on the internet. That's crazy. So this is before it was bought by Google. Like, you know, so I think it's now that people can make this stuff on their phone. You know, you can record anything on your phone and put it online. And it's obviously led to like massive amounts of bullshit on the internet, so much brain rot. But in that, there's these fantastic gems of shit that you wouldn't even think you had a passing interest in. I've met like the last while, like, so I like to listen to stuff in the car, and sometimes I don't have enough time for a podcast because it'll be broken up into too many parts. So I like audiobooks, but I found randomly there's an Irish guy named Green Dot Aviation, and he talks about like plane accidents and crashes. Some of them end badly, some of them end, or you know that Malaysia flight that disappeared.
Yes.
He made like an hour-and-a-half video about like this like scenario up to a point that we know, and then like this like dramatized version of what might have happened on board. And it is so interesting to listen to. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about planes. But this guy's commentary over like his like digitally created interior of a plane, and it's so fun to watch. And it's one of those things like I think maybe just when you become a dad, you're like World War II, planes, cars, all this random shit you need to know stuff about. I don't know why. You have to go around with a Letterman tool in your pocket.
I've started wearing body warmers recently.
Honestly.
I wear them all the time now. And I saw myself in the mirror of the car this morning. I was like, is this a dad thing?
It must be.
Because I reach for the body warmer all the time now. Yeah,
must be a thing. Like, so I think like it's one of the, like, I would never have had the opportunity to learn what I know about planes now and these events that have happened through history if this person hadn't decided one day, fuck it, I'm going to make a few videos on YouTube, you know? And it's like, I'm probably like not the target audience at all, but my God, it's so interesting.
I feel like men in general of a certain age, maybe women too, I'm not sure, but I definitely feel like men of a certain age just have an appreciation for somebody else's dedication to their craft or somebody else having pride in their craft. Because I do find myself, and I'm probably going to get a lot of people go, as they're listening to this now, I find myself like random rabbit holes watching men make lamps out of hubs of car wheels.
Yeah.
Watching people mow lawns.
Mowing lawns is class.
You see these guys who go and do it for free? They rock up and it's a jungle.
They've like the time-lapsed version.
Holy
amazing.
Power washing swimming pools and driveways. There's something really satisfying about that. But don't go on TikTok, but I recently reinstalled TikTok to just upload a bunch of clips I had, and then I get rid of it again. But my timeline is now filled with people with different techniques for installing roll plugs into walls.
Amazing.
And all these different people comparing different types of roll plugs. And it's just constant. And then there's tradesmen shitting on other tradesmen about the stuff and then sharing their specific. And I'm like, I'm just fucking like consuming this stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a unique thing. I think it's an appreciation for somebody else doing something that's productive. And you're like, oh, I'm almost living vicariously through this person who's cleaning that lawn.
100%.
I won't go out and cut my own grass, but I'll fucking watch this guy cut 1,000 acres.
Like, the one that when even you mentioned with trades and like even watching like certain types of joinery and stuff like that, it's so engaging.
When a dovetail fits just right.
Amazing.
Beautiful.
Or what was another one recently that people that do wood cutting to make like different things. It's, I think like the kind of bigger point is that like when you take a moment to zoom in on this tiny facet of life, you would never consider, you're like, holy shit, Like, it's amazing that we have not only the access to to watch this stuff now, and like it's so easily consumable and accessible, but that people will spend their whole lives, or a good proportion of their lives, or years and years to get really skilled at this specific thing, just so you can enjoy a nice cup of coffee or have an excellent sounding microphone. And I think that's one of the, and all the bad things people can say about like screen time and social media and all that stuff. That's like one of the, I think it's like all tools. It's how you use it.
It's how you use it.
I think I have a really good relationship with my social media, because every time I click on something, I'm like, time to learn more about how the Titanic sank. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
the inner workings of the Titanic, or whatever it might be.
It's the same as a personal development, though. Where is the line between me consuming this stuff and feeling really good and learning things, and actually living my life and doing things?
Yeah.
So, like, I often try and say, okay, like, I'm gonna repaint my door. This, and now I know how to paint a fucking door, but like, I'm looking for like specific sanding and painting techniques and ways I can kind of correct the angle of the door when I take it off. Like, so I'm like, okay, that's going to be practical. So that'll justify me sitting here for 20 minutes looking at guys painting doors. But now I'll try and take that information and then apply it, and I've learned a new skill. And I think that's fascinating. And I think we've cut down, if we use it right, we've significantly cut down the amount of time we need to invest to learn a skill, because a lot of, and I mean, you've mentioned this to me before in your profession as well, but a lot of the courses and stuff that are out there are 80% fluff.
Yeah.
There's a few things you need to know to get this job done. Context is important for some learning. Yeah, you need the stories, you need the surrounding material, you need to do your research in certain fields. I wouldn't just go out and look at a video of heart surgery and then pop in and give it a fucking crack or whatever. So context. But for a lot of things, you can really cut out the shit. And I've got ChatGPT and AI. Like, I'm a qualified plumber now, essentially, because ChatGPT, I have this leak. What will I do? Check all these things. Do this thing. Try this thing. I'm like, fuck, that's valuable to me. That's valuable knowledge to me.
But even down to, say, for example, we mentioned, like, you talk about, like, I've taken a nice big shit on PT courses and Stanton College in particular on here a few times. It's not that those people are fundamentally doing a bad job. It's a lot of the information that they're preaching is from a bygone age that it's not valid anymore. We've learned
the pipeline doesn't flow fast enough.
Exactly. So by the time they've like reviewed their curriculum and updated their curriculum, and and part of the problem is some of the practitioners will have an inherent bias towards certain things. And this is kind of part of the downfall of when you're trying to look at things from a very practical or science-based standpoint, is that there will be somebody who, well, that science backs up what I think, so that's the correct science.
Yeah.
So therein lies the issue. Then you're trying to whittle through that. The reality is that I can click on a YouTube video that was made 2 days ago, and it is based off the most recent thing. So if it's something I'm trying to fix in my car or fix in my house, I don't want to watch a video from 1989. I want to watch a video from 2025 or 2024. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. Like that's kind of the point. So like, yeah, you do. And even with speaking with that, and if anytime anyone has ever, and a good few of the people I coach are doing this now, they're going through their PT certs and they'll ask for advice. I'm like, just do what the course says.
Yeah.
Just do what the course says, and we can have a chat about it after. I think, especially with like coaching and personal training, they really want it to be a binary thing when it's really not a binary thing. It's a very fluid thing.
It's a fluid thing, yeah.
Because again, any dickhead can be the best coach in the world in a textbook, but they can't say hello to a person, or they wouldn't.
And you touched on an important point there, I think, and there's a really common thing comes up a lot in my world, is curation of content. As well as me going on and learning a really cool new skill, there's a lot of bullshit up there as well. There's all this mis and disinformation. There's people who are putting up information that's just wrong and they don't realize it, or that there is some sort of bias behind the information. And we have to curate that ourselves. So I'm not saying we can learn everything online. It's all going to be correct. And the person who puts up the video yesterday might have a huge confirmation bias and they're missing, and the video from 89 might actually be more relevant. But like that's a tricky area right now. We're going to have to learn how to curate our information and maybe cross-reference it a little bit and figure out what fits us and try things out.
I think it's that, though. It's always trying to put something factual through the filter of human emotion. Like we talked a little bit about it before we start recording, where like people can have very, very strong feelings about like things like politics. So you could have a person in a very strong political position who's very popular, but makes very bad political decisions for the greater majority of the country, or at least for a majority of the, like even recently with the Irish elections, people voted for the same parties again, but that's because the people that actually showed up to vote are people that these parties have done good things for. So whether that's, you know, if you're a homeowner that doesn't want anything to change about your mortgage or like the taxes you pay or the position you're in, of course you want things to stay the same because life's good for you. Whereas if you're a young person under the age of 30, you really want let's say the housing market in Ireland to change, the opportunities in Ireland to change, the cost of living in Ireland to change. So you might think to vote like Social Democrats, but then you might not necessarily agree with some of their progressive ideas about like things like abortion and things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a tricky landscape, and people, rather than actually learning what policies they agree with politics, they go, I don't like those people, so I won't vote for them. I do like her social media content, so I'll vote for her party. America, the prime example.
Yeah.
Donald Trump bad because Orange Man bad. Rather than, well, what is he actually doing politically? Not like what is the news telling you. Like, what does, if he signs an executive order, what does that mean to people on the fundamental level, on the boots on the ground? What's going to happen now? You know, and people generally don't get that far with their own research or their own like investment in something. It's how do I feel about this thing? I feel bad. Okay, then it's bad.
And you do usually hear, it was big during COVID as well, what you hear and what you see and what the world actually is like. There's a huge disconnect there, because day to day, how is my life or the lives of the people I love going to be affected by this particular thing? And what does it look like right now? And what is the little black box telling me?
Yeah.
And the little black box telling you the world is going to burn, it's going to explode. And if you're talking about Donald Trump, he's going to fucking kill this particular demographic and export and create prison camps. And like, okay, fine. Now walk outside your front door and have a little look around.
Yeah.
And ask some people and talk to real people and see what the general feel is. It's probably not the same.
Yeah.
Now, I knew this was going to happen. We've been completely sidetracked for the first 10 minutes of this podcast.
Whoopsie daisy.
So AI, YouTube, and social media are going to raise our kids. This is probably an irrelevant podcast to do. However, you've recently become a father.
Yes.
I am very, very interested. Congratulations to yourself and Katie, by the way. And beautiful baby boy. I am very interested in a couple of key areas. I said this in the last podcast. We sometimes talk about things and then a thing happens and then we talk about things again. You're like, oh, now I think different things about this thing. Parenthood, I find, is one of those things. A lot of my, maybe not my fundamental views and values, but a lot of the way I interacted with the world before I had children and now has shifted significantly and continues to shift. So I'm very interested what you have to say about that particular situation. But I have a series of questions here to try and keep us on track. So I'm going to refer to these questions that I don't usually do. But first of all, just give me a general overview. How's your experience been becoming a father?
Genuinely, it is, for me, it has been the best experience I've ever. I never felt so elated in my life when I found out Katie was pregnant, but then also when both of them were safe and we were in the hospital. Like, I'm not an emotional person, but it was a very emotional period of time. Even the first couple of weeks there at home, like, it was very, very, like, I felt everything just at the top. You know what I mean? So that has been a wild experience, because I would say there's an author I like, and he spoke before about like emotions, and he says he doesn't really ever get like really depressed or anything. He doesn't really experience sadness very profoundly. But on the flip side of that, he doesn't really feel happiness very profoundly. Now, he has kids and all, and they make him happy. But like, generally speaking, he doesn't seem to experience these massive highs and lows that people experience. So, you know, he'll never go lower than a 4. He'll never go higher than like 7. And I would have very much felt the same for a very long period of time, but I cannot explain the joy I have when I'm playing with my boy. I can't, like, I would much rather do that than anything else. Like, I love just fucking around with him. You know what I mean? And Kate is actually very good. She'd be like, you have to work. Like, you've stuff to do on your computer. And I'm like, fuck that. Like, I'll just be fucking him up around in the air, rolling around the floor with him. And like, right now, he's obviously still quite small. He's almost 9 months old, but like, even since maybe you've been able to kind of fuck with him for a while. You know what I mean? So that's been like just massively, it's small menial things, changes, nappy, feeding him, just getting him out and about, taking him out for a walk. It's such a simple joy of life. And I really think, I don't know what's happened over maybe the past 20 years. I think there's a massive psyop to convince people parenting is hard and you have to sacrifice so much. And there is elements of that. But like, I think there's this idea that you're fundamentally going to be unhappy, and I have never been happier in my life. I cannot put it into words. I love Katie more than I've ever loved her before. It's made me like, I appreciate my family more. Like, I'll always love my family, but like, I understand. I want them to be around him more. You know what I mean? I want to be around my family more. I want to be around my friends more. Like, obviously within reason, because we don't want to fuck the baby's schedule, because he sleeps kind of good now, so we don't want to mess that up.
Do not break that.
So I really wish I could say there's parts of it that like I found like excruciatingly difficult, and there are hard parts of it, but I think I feel like it's like a whole second part of your life that you only really know when you become a parent. And I don't want to speak for everybody else's experience, because I know some people have a hard time, but I think it is depending on what age you have them on, what situation you're in your relationship. I do think it can be hard for people, and I think we spoke before about it, and you know, you do kind of have to grow up in a way. But I think maybe for me, like, you know, the stars aligned, and I was just ready for this to be this thing. And I can't wait for every day. Like, we've got a camera, and I wait for the motherfucker to wake up so I can play with him. You know what I mean? Every night I wake up thinking I have him in the bed somewhere, and I'm going to drop him every single night without fail. Even if I'm staying off somewhere else and he's not there. Yeah, I dream about him. It's mad. Like I've never known love like it. Like I love him so much.
I'm delighted for you. That's beautiful. Really, really nice. What I'm going to do in this conversation is provide some friction to this. Not play devil's advocate. I'm not playing devil's advocate, but just to provide some friction, because I do know from having many, many, many conversations with other parents and other fathers and mothers, it's not just about fathers, that is not the universal experience for most people, in my experience from having conversations. I'm not saying that there's not a study research. I haven't looked at anything, but from my experience talking to people, and you've kind of pointed at this as well, because you've mentioned it several times to me, loads of people want this to be hard for you because it's been hard for them. You've experienced that as well.
Yeah.
So with that experience in mind, that's why I'm providing this little bit of friction for you, because I am delighted that that's how you feel. And most of the time that's how I feel. But I also go through periods of my life where I'm like, this is fucking hard.
Yeah.
But I have now come to realize that's a me thing. Objectively, the thing is the thing. So objectively, would it be fair to say that raising a child is disruptive to your way of life up to that point? It disrupts that.
Yep.
That's not a negative term. It disrupts what you were doing. It changes the course of what you were doing, how you can spend your time, and like where you've put your focus and attention. There are inherent things that are challenging in terms of, in a lot of cases, you have a lack of sleep. That's a challenging thing for a human being. It changes your food cycle. It changes what you can do with your spare time. It changes what you do for fun.
Yep.
These are all inherently challenging to the human condition. My proposal for you, and I said this in the last podcast, and I say it again today, is you are a slight outlier, I would say, based on your own upbringing, the level of maturity I think you have compared to the average 36-year-old.
Yeah.
The thing you do for work and life, you run your own business, and you are involved in an inherently difficult sport, which is powerlifting, which is based on constant challenge and growth. So you have a relatively unique set of circumstances there that have probably prepared you for this challenge. So your interpretation of this objective thing is different.
Yes.
A lot of people are not in that position when they have a child.
Yeah.
They maybe are under a lot of pressure or stress that they haven't dealt with. They maybe haven't the clarity of mind and purpose that you have. Would it be fair to say that that can change how you interpret this parenting thing? It could be the hardest thing you've ever fucking done in your entire life. There's someone listening right now who has a 9-month-old child like you for the first child, and they are struggling in the depths of it.
Yep.
Is that something you can acknowledge?
Absolutely. I do have a counterpoint though.
Please.
It's not a fucking surprise. Everyone, even if the pregnancy was a surprise, you have 9 fucking months to get ready. You have 9 months, maybe more in some cases, maybe less in others, but you don't have no time at all, and it's not suddenly a surprise. And this is actually where I will draw a line with people. Instead of fucking focusing on whether you have an aubergine or a sweet potato this week, or whether their fingernails or fucking eyeballs are growing, maybe start looking up how to look after a child. So one thing I was very adamant about was, I'm going to know how to look after my baby when he comes out. I'm not going to wait for a midwife to show me how to change a nappy. I'm going to know how to, like, what I need to do to wash bottles. I'm going to need to do to know how to hold him, how to get him to sleep, how to soothe him. I know they don't sleep very well. I know Katie's going to be in the trenches way more than I am, because she breastfed for the first 6 months of his life. So I know that primarily I'm going to play a support role. And I think a massive component of it, just from listening to the experiences of other dads as well, is it is a very emotionally draining time, because obviously your relationship almost takes like a back seat to looking after the child. And you have to be mature enough to weather that. You're not always going to get the best version of your partner, because they're fucking exhausted. Particularly Katie had to have a C-section, emergency C-section. So her recovery was then prolonged. And that wasn't initially the thing we had planned for, but all the best laid plans. So I knew no matter how tired I was, or no matter how fucked up I felt, or no matter how upsetting it might be for me, for like, if the baby's crying and she's upset and it's just me, I have to be the rock in that scenario. I have to be, not the rock, the people's champion, the rock is cooking. Yeah, I need to be the pillar of support. And you don't, now look, I'm not saying I've always done it perfectly. I'm not saying I've always been fucking perfect at this particular role. But I don't think, I can acknowledge that people will find it extremely hard in some cases, sure. But I don't think you get to pretend like you didn't know it was going to be this hard. I don't think you have a right to do it. I think the problem is people want to prolong the period of their time in their life where they just get to be young, dumb, and stupid and have no real responsibility. Oh, to pay a fucking phone bill? Grow up. Like, everyone has the enough roadway in front of them to sort shit out. Now, look, if you have a kid when you're 21 versus 31, that's different. I'm sure that's going to be very challenging, right? And I'm not going to speak for those people. I'm speaking for somebody in my mid to late 30s who had a child, and I made sure I was as prepared as I could be. Now, look, I don't have the perfect situation. I don't own my own house. I run my own business. There's no safety net. There's pros and cons, like we know. I don't work an average 9 to 5, so I can be around more of when I'm needed. But it also means my sleep is a significantly lower priority on my list. So I have probably not slept like a full night in a very long time, which is fine. You know what I mean? The baby sleeps really well. I just fucking wake up to check on him. I don't know if that's like a thing with first-time parents. I just need to go and make sure he's still alive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I do. I can empathize with that. Like, it's like most things. Your challenging thing, like some people learning to drive. Some people fail their test 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. Some people get it right in one go. It's a bigger thing for different people. And I know based on your own upbringing, your own family life, how supported you are, your own relationship with your parents, it's going to inform a lot of the decision making you're going to have, a lot of how you're going to feel about becoming a parent and what it's going to mean to you and the responsibility that is. Maybe it is the biggest responsibility you've ever had. And I can appreciate that is difficult. The same way I appreciate that somebody could be a CEO of a company, makes 6 figures a year and is extremely nervous to walk into a fly fit gym for the first time. It's like, man, you fucking, like, you're a boss of like 500 people. You're going to sit in the back of a spin class and cycle for 30 minutes. Not a big deal. But to them, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
So I think becoming a parent is a big deal for everyone. And I think there are innumerable number of factors that go into your perception of it. But I don't think people can say they weren't prepared. And if they weren't prepared, it's their fault. So we were with the Rotunda Hospital. They did an excellent job. They ran fucking Zoom classes so we could all jump on and listen to fucking what happens even with the fucking pelvis bone for the woman. Now, I didn't fucking need to know about that, but I fucking found out about it. So like we talked about at the start, with the advent of the likes of YouTube and social media and access to this kind of information, ignorance is a choice. You've a choice to know nothing or to know something. It might not all be correct, but you're fucking taking a step in the right direction. You're being proactive about becoming a parent. You don't like... And you know what I will say? I think women are better at this than men because it's gradually happening to them over time. They feel that, like, they know the baby's growing, their body's changing, so this end date's ticking down. And I do think some lads go around with their thumb up their arse for the entire thing and just kind of wait for it to happen, and then they're just there scratching their hole, not knowing what to do. And I don't think you get it. I don't think you get to do that. I don't think you get to be a parent and also just throw your hands up and be like, I don't fucking know what I'm doing. Figure it out. Figure it out. Especially if, like, I was fucking 36 when this little bastard was born. It's like, I've fucking had 36 years to get this shit right. You know, I've been an adult for 18 years. So I've had enough time to get shit together. Now, look, that's not to say that's going to be the case for everybody. And in one way I would say I don't want to preach to anybody, but I will say I've been preached at by other parents. Because
Since or before?
Before and during and after. Okay. Like, I've found the experience, like, with other people to be more negative than positive, to be honest, when it comes to a baby. People really want this experience to be tough. And they really think it's like these definitive outliers. Are they sleeping through the night yet? Are they eating okay? It's like, well, he's fucking 2 months old. Maybe he's not sleeping through the night. Who cares? He's a baby. Maybe he's not meant to sleep through the night just yet. Maybe that's a for you thing. Maybe you want him to sleep through the night because, like all adults are like, oh, he's sleeping through the night. We're getting a full night's sleep. Yeah, great, but he's a little baby. What if that's not what he needs right now? Maybe he does need to wake up every couple of hours because he's fucking hungry or he's scared. He's a fucking baby. Jesus Christ, like, it's so bizarre. I find it so bizarre. The most bizarre thing is how quickly people expect babies to be routined, eating a certain way, drinking a certain way, sleeping a certain way, behaving a certain way. It's like, motherfucker, you're an adult and you don't do that shit. You can't get through the week without drinking. You know what I mean? Like, come on. You know, it's the most bizarre experience to see how people's interactions with you change when you become a parent. I hope that answers that question to a degree.
It does. I find this very interesting, right? Because my experience as a parent was different, and a lot of people listening were different. We've always covered this. We don't want to beat this point to death. I think you are an outlier in this space because you had a lot of shit together when you had a child.
Right.
You might not think you have all the shit together. No one has all the shit together. But in my opinion, I've said this to you before, I think you have a very, very solid way of thinking about the world. And most challenges that come your way, I think you will be able to find a way to navigate them because you've developed a set of tools for yourself, both through your original experience as a child yourself, and you talked about not having a strong male role model and the wrestling and all that kind of stuff you got into. You've had that pathway that you've been an active participant in. I'm not saying this has just happened to you. That's given you this kind of experience now with your child. So I have had my third child at 35, 36. Yeah. So I am now the same age as you, and it's at a similar point in my life journey personally, but I'm on my third child, so it's a slightly different one. So like when I had my first child, I didn't necessarily have, and I told you this in the last podcast, didn't have the most positive experience, not with the child, with myself. It was a complete fucking awakening for me as to, holy now I have to get my shit together. And I crumbled for a little while. And in my relationship, when all of our children were young, Jill did a lot of the practical young child things. And as they grew, I found more of a way to contribute with the children. Jill breastfed our kids, all of them. She did the late night feeds because she breastfed them. We didn't bottle feed or pump or anything like that. So she did all of that. She always woke up with them. But then as they became older, I found a place to contribute. I probably could have done that earlier. I probably could have shouldered more of the load earlier on, like you're doing now with your child. And when you mentioned that to me initially, I felt a bit of guilt looking back at when I raised my child. But the position I was in then and now is completely different.
Yeah.
So even with our latest child, I've been able to be more involved because I've understood that a little bit more. But I absolutely 100% agree with everything you've said, even though you're challenging the way I raised or I reacted at the start. Now,
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
You were 29 when you had your first
I was
child?
29 when I had my first child.
So, like, this just to emphasize that, like, I'm sure I would have a very different series of answers if I was
Quite
29
possibly.
when I had my first child. I'd probably I'd probably have had a very different story.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is that I was in the right place myself to do it. So that is one thing I will absolutely hold my hands up and say. But like, I would also say like that was to a degree manufactured. I knew I wanted to start having kids soon. You know what I mean? So,
and by the way, I now know why I reacted that way. It wasn't because of the child. I said this before.
Yourself.
It was me. I was having a crisis of identity. I spoke about my relationship with my family and how good my dad was to me, and I had never really developed some of the skills I feel I need to be a competent man. And I'm now working on that.
Yeah.
So I'm now in a better position. Still working on it, obviously, but at 29, hadn't done much work on that.
Yeah.
And at 29, you had done more work on that than I had done. Just through your life experience, it's fine, and some people will and some people won't. So, but what I would like to say about how you've presented that's going to fucking piss a lot of people off. But I think objectively, I can't disagree with anything you've said there. And there's a quote here that I pulled, and I listened. I was laughing. You mentioned Jordan Peterson already in this one. We mentioned about 10 times the last podcast as well. But there's just some nice phrases. He talks about parenting sometimes, and there's a line here he used. This isn't the exact quote, but it essentially means that embracing responsibilities of parenthood is essential for personal development. Number one. So embracing that this is what it is really important. Not surrendering to it, but saying, this is what it is.
Yep.
Now what can I do? Not, oh, fucking poor me. And then the second thing is, nowadays, does society place too much emphasis on personal development over duty? And when I was thinking about this question, that wasn't a Peterson one, I was just thinking about this question. Do we as society now put way too much emphasis on us as ourselves and our personal growth and our personal duty or our personal experience compared to what our duty is? And if we decide to have a child or if we know we're having a child, whether we like it or not, we now have a responsibility and a duty, which should supersede all of the I want to be a fulfilled person and have a great experience. It shouldn't completely obliterate it, but it should be more important. It should be more of a priority. Now, there's the argument that if I become a better version of myself, I will be better at that. But in the hierarchy of I now feel is important and what I get from what you've just said, now my duty and responsibility is to the baby and to the baby's mother. I didn't necessarily consciously understand that when I had a child first. And I am learning that more and more with every day that goes by. I have a duty and a responsibility. You keep saying, he's a fucking baby.
Yeah.
I use that line all the time in my head now.
Yeah.
I didn't before you started saying it. And now when my children cry, I'm like, he's a fucking baby. What am I doing here? What am I getting annoyed and pissed off at this? There's a problem here. My responsibility and duty as a father is to try and help this situation, this child. So I'm challenged, and a lot of people will be challenged by what you've just said and how you've said it, but I 100% agree with you.
Well, thank you. Like, I realize like it can be, it's a tough thing to hear, but if somebody's listening and they're pissed off but they don't like the sound of it, maybe they need to look at why they're pissed off. Maybe you do have circumstances that you're justified in how you feel, but I'd like to hear them because I don't think they're that serious. The point is, your problems are never going to be bigger than a tiny little person who can't feed themselves, can't change themselves, and the only way they have to let you know something wrong is crying. So you have to imagine for that little baby who's like so vulnerable, and then they know you're pissed off or you're exasperated that they're crying, they're a fucking baby. Why are you trying to make the problem worse? They can't do anything else. And I know it can be hard. It's 2:00 in the morning, the baby's crying. So...
Okay, so yeah, can I just, because as you go, I want to just ask you questions.
Sure.
You will acknowledge that thing objectively is hard. That siren at 2:00 in the morning is not a nice feeling. It's not that you're saying, that's easy. No, it's not easy, but it's not the hardest thing in the world that's ever happened.
Not at all.
Okay.
Training's also not a nice feeling.
Yeah, it's not.
Like, it doesn't feel good. Well, like you play football. I'm sure when somebody slide tackles you, it doesn't feel very nice.
Do you get people ask you this question sometimes about training? Let's say that's easier to understand. some people would look at what you do
Mhm.
and think you really enjoy training.
Mm.
Now, you enjoy the feeling you get from training. You enjoy all of the outcomes of training. And maybe you enjoy the banter and the camaraderie of the training. But when you're in the hole, to use a squat term for what people don't know what it means, when you're down there under the bar and you are like, fuck, this has to go back up. Do you enjoy that feeling?
Absolutely not. No, it's brutal.
Okay, yeah.
Like the thing is, but that's. Do you know? Ever heard a book, The Obstacle Is the Way?
Oh, by Ron Holiday, yeah.
So actually, I'm listening to one of his books. At the
I went to
moment.
see him like last year.
Oh, class.
Yeah.
He, you know the way he wrote the Daily Stoic? He has
Yes.
one called the Daily Dad.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I haven't got it. I read the Daily Stoic.
I've been listening to it. So just one a day, just one. If I miss one, I skip it, and
That's a good idea.
I'll listen to it every day. But there's a couple of things. Daily Dad, so good. I'll read you something from it in a little while because it was the first. It's the first January 1st thing on it, and man, it fucking hit me. It hit me in the heart. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a poem, and it fucking hit. Like, it hurt. Like, it hurt to listen to. It maybe contextually more for me because I didn't have a dad growing up. But I'll tell you about it later. Remind me of that.
Okay. You don't want to read it first on the air?
Oh, I'll read it on air,
Okay.
but I'll read it towards the end.
Okay.
Just in case I fucking get upset. Like,
Yeah.
but so yeah, like, no, even like specifically right now, I do not enjoy training. I don't like going there. I don't like warming up. I don't like doing any things that I do. But sometimes the things that we do are just the things that we do, and that's what is the difference maker. You don't always have to. If you only do things when you enjoy them, then what's the point? Why would you get up and go to work? Because you like money. Yeah, cool. I like the result. I like being strong. I like being stronger than most people at these three things. You know what I mean? I would much rather be the person that went to training when they didn't want to go, even if your heart wasn't fully in it, than the person that sat on the couch. Yeah, so like there's a couple of things that I always try to keep in mind when it comes to, there are going to be those moments like that. I'll actually give you a prime example. Open Nationals in November, Irish PF Open Nationals, the biggest tested competition domestically in Ireland. How you place at this competition will dictate the rest of your year. So if you place well, you're likely going to go international, represent the country. So it's my first time. I was competing in the under 105 kilo category. I normally go into the under 93s. I did that for Western European Championships in Malta in September. And dieting while having a little baby and not sleeping very well was very tough. And I will say, I've mentioned, I owe a lot of that prep to Katie. She made sure I was on track with food. She cooked me a lot and was looking after the baby. A lot of mornings, she'd just get up with him and take him out of the room when I didn't wake up, and she'd just let me sleep.
Wow.
So that was like that. Fucking the MVP of that prep was Katie. Like, so for nationals, and I said, like, for about a year, I'll just go up a weight class. Doesn't mean I'm going to weigh 105 kilos, but I don't have to just get down to under 93. So even if I'm walking around 96, 97, it just means no cutting. So I'm coming into Open Nationals. Prep was going okay. The morning of it, 3:30 in the morning, Arthur wakes up and he's upset. And he very rarely wakes up crying, but he was upset. So Katie had gotten up with him like the last couple of nights. So I was like, I'm just going to get up with him. Because she was trying to settle him and put him back down. I was like, he's not going to sleep. None of us are going to sleep. So I just took him out 3:30 in the morning. I sat with him in my lap on the couch for about 3 hours until he woke up properly. Then about 6:30. And then Katie got up at about like 7:30 or 8 or whatever it was. And she kept saying, like, you know, you've a fucking competition. Like, what are you doing? I was like, fuck that. It doesn't matter. Like, the point is, like, yeah, I could have said, you know, fuck the baby. She can look after the baby and prioritize this thing. But the point is, there will come a day I compete for the last time. I'm with Katie now forever. I'll always be Arthur's dad. So, fair enough, there might be times to reprioritize things. But I think you make enough of those choices where you put so many more things ahead of your family or ahead of your children. It will all come back around eventually. So, like, he'll never remember that I fucking sacrificed a fucking good night's sleep before a big competition so he could sleep well on my lap. But I'll know. Yeah. And that's the important thing. I'll know where my priorities were when it mattered. Now, incidentally, for the competition, had a great day, got a squat personal best, got a bench personal best. And then I loaded a third deadlift. I loaded 305. I had pulled 290. I only needed to load 297 to keep third place, which would have got me on the podium. The other two guys were too far ahead, and there was one guy fucking breathing down my neck. And of course, I dropped it. I got it to the top, and I didn't lock it out.
Damn it, Arthur.
Yeah, you little motherfucker. Those 3 extra hours would have made the difference. The thing is, though, is that, like, in the grand scheme, it will never matter. And that's kind of the point. So there's a couple of small things I always keep in mind. And I play them back in my head. And it might be cliche. They might be like from Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts or whatever bullshit, right? And one of them is the life you had before your kid and the life you have after your kid. You're going to be able to do the same things. So the period of you all the fun things you were doing before you had a baby that you can't do right now, you'll get to do all those things again at the other end. You'll only ever have your kid once. And particularly if you have a boy. that motherfucker's going to get out of here. And they say, I read a thing, it's more for women. It's having a baby boy is going through the most drawn out breakup of your life because they're eventually just going to leave.
Yeah.
And like, I see it for myself. Like I see, like my mom works really hard to make sure she, like, I try and have the parents around, like the grandparents around as much as I can. Like, but like I'm quite like, we have to be here and do this and this and this. So I can see they really want to be involved, and I can see how challenging it can be. You know what I mean? So I want to enjoy every moment to have him while he wants to just play with me and fuck around with me. And you mentioned like him crying. Like if he's in his little playpen and he cries, and he's trying to learn to crawl now, so he gets frustrated. He'll always look up. If I'm there, he'll look up at me crying because he knows, oh, I'm upset. I need to go to my like emotional, like rock my emotional center here. What do I do? So if I'm going, fuck's sake, that's just going to make it 10 times worse. Why would I do that to him?
Yeah.
So I won't. Usually I'll just clap at him and cheer him on and tell him to keep going, keep training. He'd be in his like his high plank because it's so funny watching him do it. Like, but if he gets really upset, I'll go to him and I'll cuddle him, I'll kiss him and I'll tell him it's all right because he's a fucking baby, you know? The other thing to always keep in mind is that like all those shit moments where they won't stop crying or they've puked their shit everywhere or whatever it might be, there's going to come a day where you're like 80 years old, you're going to be on your fucking deathbed potentially, and you'd give anything just to go back once, just to hold them when they were that small. And everyone that has a kid says that to me.
Yeah.
Everyone. So they say, like another woman I know messaged. I was doing like an Instagram Q&A or something like that, and I just put up, I would video reply, but the baby is having a contact nap on me or something like that. And she said, I would give anything for my kids to contact nap on me again. And she's got small kids, but they just don't do that anymore.
This feels to me like one of those conversations. Why I really love being able to do this on microphone, right? Because those things that are challenging to hear are really valuable tools to prep you to go into something difficult. We're talking about parenthood here now, so we'll stick with that particular challenge of parenthood. If I had been able to listen to someone speak like you, it might have annoyed me and pissed me off before I had kids, but at least I go, okay, this guy has said I should, one, figure out what my priorities are before I go into this. Like, what are actually my priorities now? I know I'm having a child. Actually think about that. Personally, I didn't think about what my priorities were, so I had to figure it out on the run. That's difficult. Number two, get some perspective. Can I look at this and acknowledge, okay, there's going to be 8, 12, fucking 20 weeks of maybe sleepless nights, figuring it out, poor relations with my partner, everybody's tired, everyone's fucking bitchy, whatever's going on, difficulty, potentially sick children, whatever, challenges. And get some perspective on this and go, this is going to be a period of my life. Because when you're in it, it feels like this is now my life. Because if you haven't developed that skill of like distancing yourself from the now for a fucking minute or two, every challenge you have feels like this is the rest of my fucking life, which is why we react so viscerally to a challenge. Someone cuts me off in traffic. I am angry. Is it okay? This has happened right now. I can get angry and I can have this response, or I can do this. That requires you building up that skill and that tolerance or that ability to distance yourself for like a half a beat before you react to something. But if you try and do it in a moment, again, it's fucking hard. So I think listening to you, it's not, I don't hear I have a different perspective because I have children, but I don't hear preaching from the pulpit. I hear these are a set of skills potentially I could integrate into my life if it's appropriate to my situation, and will probably make my experience and my children's experience and my partner's experience better. So why not give it a go? And then the second thing you mentioned there, it is such a cliche. My God, it is the truest thing. My eldest child, who Jill just called me about there, is 7. She just turned 7. I remember this period that you're talking about with her, and it was yesterday. Like, what? It's so cliched. It is, your child is 9 months old. I remember you telling me that Katie was pregnant. Yeah. Like it was yesterday. Yeah. It really is a cliche. It is the most solid example I've ever seen of time flies. You don't get it back. And the other thing, and again, this was something Peterson also said, but it's so true. That period of time from baby put in hands to like 5 or 6. Like Zoe's out of that now. Zoe's a person. She's her own person. Obviously, she just depends and relies on us, but she is becoming independent. She's a thinker. She's not as reliant on us emotionally. She is becoming a person. And there's a bit of that's lost. And then look at my next guy, and he's about to turn 4. And I just see it. It's slower in him now. He's a bit slower, but I see in him, he's just starting to kind of become, the eyes are opening up and he's thinking about things a little bit differently, and he's no longer looking at me and Jill like we're the only things that matter. That's fucking heartbreaking. So now I'm looking at my little fella going, see you little fucker. Helicopter parenting you for the rest of your life. But it is such a cliche, but that's something that I can contribute to this conversation from experience. All of those things, no matter what your experience of them are valid. If it's fucking the most difficult thing ever, whatever. But ultimately, you will look back, because I look back with not regret, But I lament a little bit looking back at those couple of initial years where like I struggled in my own head and I wasn't prepared. And it's like, fuck, what if I did have a little bit more prep going into that, a bit more perspective? I would have gotten a better experience out of that. And so would Zoe and so would Jill out of that period of time. Don't regret it now. And obviously we work on these things as we go. But yeah, that's what I'm feeling from what you're saying here now. It's and you'll understand now what I mean, because you wouldn't have before. You genuinely look at people who are having kids or who have kids or are planning to have kids or whatever, and you go, I need you to know this thing. This is fucking true. This is an incredible experience, but you're going to be clouded a little bit by all the challenges. Yeah. But fuck me, please embrace it because it's beautiful.
It's tough because like we're in a way lucky because so many people in our group have had kids in the same, like Katie's sister had a baby 9 days ahead of us, a little baby boy as well. My friend Vinny had a little baby girl. Katie's best friend had a baby. My sister had a baby, and they're all in that like 6 to 9 month, maybe 7 to 9 month age range or so. So it's very interesting to see how the babies are developing. They all have their own little like characteristics and personalities, but also just watching how everyone's navigated parenting. You know what I mean? And like what they are seeing as the challenge, you know what I mean? Or what they are seeing as the easy part or whatever. And that's been very, like, I would really, I'm not going to name names of it anybody, obviously, because everyone is obviously doing their best. But I can see who didn't prepare and who did. Like who was ready to embrace parenthood and who wasn't. And look, I do think there is a part of, I think what like some people that don't have kids don't like about the idea of having kids is, yes, the change fundamentally to your life, the lack of free time or freedom, as they might think of it, but also people that strictly become your identity as you're a parent. Like, I'll actually say this, like, before I had my son, I have greatly admired what you were doing with your kids. Like, you had your own kids, you had your partner, you were making your own, you were growing a business, you managed to do this while having kids. I admired that greatly, like, and I still do. So, as much as, like, yeah, sure, I'm sure, like, some of these things, maybe, like, the 29-year-old version of Dan, probably like, fucking prick. Yeah. Like, I can also say, like, look, you obviously did the best you could with what you knew then. I'm sure I would have been in a very similar boat at 29. I would say that to anyone, like, who is, I do think I'm in a very good position. Katie's in a very good position. And maybe, like, people could like to use the word lucky. That word doesn't fucking come into it, because if I just had followed the route life had led out for me, I wouldn't have been lucky. You know what I mean? I think there's absolutely an element of choice, circumstance, happenstance, all these parts. But, like, people like to equate to luck what takes like years of work to get to. You know what I mean? Like, if I had done this when I was working in FlyFit, like 40 hours or so a week for FlyFit, another 30 or 40 hours of PT, yeah, it probably wouldn't have been as easy. It probably would have been incredibly hard, or it would have been a massive fundamental shift to the way my life runs. I think now, because I'm a reputable and well-regarded online powerlifting coach, and I still do coach in person to a degree, I think the freedom in that is what's allowed me to be very involved in the process. But to be honest, one thing I will say, I have massive respect for people that are able to get up and go to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and not see their kids. That must be incredibly hard, because I couldn't. Yeah. I don't know if I could do that. Like,
yeah, I like. Well, Jesus, compassion from Ian Grant. This is fucking. It's amazing. a massive 90-degree turn here in the conversation. I know you're a very compassionate person. When you're speaking there, there's something I feel like I want to say. I think this is all very experiential. It's all very contextual and individual. And I'm like you as well, because I was thinking about this morning. I listened to our original podcast, and I was driving in thinking, 4 or 5 years ago, I was of the ilk to say everyone should quit their job and go and live your dream and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm like, hold on, there's a place for everything. And you actually said in the last podcast, we need a mix of everything. And my lifestyle wouldn't suit other people, and other people's lifestyle wouldn't suit me. I couldn't do what some of my friends do. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't have the tolerance for it, and they do. And I've always said I find that quite admirable as well. And all of this is, while there might be some underlying principles that we've discussed there, all of it is individual, and everyone can live their life in the way that they decide. Yeah. Where I see the issue is, a lot of us don't decide. It's unconscious.
Yeah, it just happens.
It just happens to us, and then we rail against it happening to us, and we feel it's so unjust. Now, there are some things that can be construed as unjust. Some people get sick, some people pass away before they should. There definitely are injustices in the world. But for a lot of us, it is within our power to dictate a little bit more about how we live our lives. But yeah, like you were saying there, there's people I massively admire who do the opposite from me. And I'm like, wow, I have so much respect for those people who like you, they get up every single day and they do their job and they do it well and they support their family. I'm like, fuck, I wish I could be a bit more like this element of them. Yeah. And I'm sure they look at someone like you or someone like me and say, God, I wish I could have my own job. These people are amazing, and you paid me a nice compliment there. Like, how you run a business and do all this, but there's other areas of my life where I'm like, fuck, I'm a piece of shit over here. Like, can I not do this? And that's just a human condition, I feel.
This is why we have support networks. We have teams of people that prop us up. Like, I'm not very fucking creative. Like, I'm a retard with a laptop. Like, you know what I mean? I fucking, if something breaks, I text like, what the fuck is wrong with this thing?
Yeah.
So now he runs his own photography business and videography business, but like, he'll be like, how the fuck do I interact with this person to like get them to be a client? How do I talk to them about money? I can do that bit.
Yeah.
I can talk to people. He can't do that bit, but he's very good with a camera. So I think like that, it is in the same way it says like, you know, it takes a village to raise a kid or whatever. I think it's what we've really lost, I think, in the 21st century is you have a support network. Just use it. People want to help. People want to be, whether that's with your kids, whether that's with your career. Like, I don't know how to run a podcast. That's why I come to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Hopefully you know a bit now at this stage.
Well,
Nearly 50 episodes in.
Look, I mean, I know how to sit down and talk shit to people, but I can just go la 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 and focus, put the bandwidth somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, I want to be actually, that was, one of the lads got me Jacob got me a t-shirt when Arthur was like being cooked he was in the womb, right? So I'm a DILF. I'm a diligent, involved, loving father. And that's like, but that's the point. It's like, it's important to me to be, and look, I realize for some men, maybe playing a proactive role in their children's early development maybe isn't that important. Maybe they're like, my job is to make as much fucking bank as possible that they never have to worry and live, like they never have to be hovering above the poverty line. They will never want for anything. And I do think it's kind of like, it's part of the tragedy almost of being a dad. Because like, I saw a thing, I don't even know if I've mentioned this before, but it was like, a guy spoke to his dad, it's a short clip, he spoke to his dad, and he asked his dad, like, you know, how he felt he was as a father. And he was like, I was a fucking great dad. Like, you know, I was involved in your life and I made sure you didn't want for anything. But he was like, I really wish you'd been around more. Because he was always working, right? But he came to like his football games, things like that. But then he spoke about, I just didn't want to be a dad the way my dad was. And his dad was like very cold, very distant, but he provided for the family. But his dad used to beat him. So he was like, I'm never going to beat my kids. So when he was pissed off, he didn't beat his kids, but he withdrew. So it's a cycle. Like the great granddad was obviously like a bit of a shithead, beat his kids. His kid was like, I'll adamantly never beat my kids. So his dad, his dad was cold. So then the granddad was like, obviously, or the dad was a case of, I'm not going to be cold to my kids. I'm going to be involved. But he obviously prioritized like working and things like that. So then this guy is like, with my kids, I want to make sure I'm around enough. So you don't want to then repeat the cycle of the kids want for everything. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And this is kind of what I hypothesized about you with your experience that you shared as well. Like that probably shaped your burning desire to be this type of a father for your son because you've had a different experience.
Yeah.
And again, to be compassionate here as well with this, whatever your experience is, it's unlikely it's you in a vacuum being a certain type of person. You've been shaped by your environment as well.
Absolutely.
What I would hypothesize, however, from all of the information I've gathered, conversations that I've had, if you listen to what most people say at the end, I know this is cliched, but most of the conversations do circle around, I wish I had spent more time with my children and not, I wish I had made more money. I completely understand, as I was saying, that balance between duty and personal growth and responsibility, and where does that lie for a man and for a woman? And yeah, this drive to make money to provide a better life can mean your distance and what do the children actually care about at the end of the day. I now feel this from my kids. They don't give a fuck what I drive, how much I make, what house we're in. They do not give a fuck. Obviously, you want to provide a stable, solid life for them. Yeah. So there's a line, but past that line, they don't care. Past that line, it's on me and my sense of inadequacy and my sense of not being enough and my sense of trying to prove myself to the world. So I have to find a line between my duty to my children and what will they think when we are older? Yeah. What will I think at the end going, shit, they don't even like me that much. They don't like me that much. They love me, but they don't really even like me that much. Actually, I had a conversation with Brian Keane recently. He said this.
I think I saw a clip, actually.
Yeah, maybe even in that clip. And we were talking about ultramarathons and stuff. And I was like,
that's right.
Like, he does all this stuff and he has a daughter. And I was like, what's the line now? And he's like, now it's completely different. I don't want to be that person who my kid loves because she has to, but doesn't like. And that seems to be a common theme. So I think if there's a North Star that we could potentially look at when we're struggling with this decision of, do I make all the money to provide the security, whatever, we try and maybe look at that North Star as, okay, what's my children's experience of me going to be? Do they care about all this money? I care because it means all these different things and because of my dad and my granddad and all this kind of stuff. but what will their experience be?
Yeah.
And I think that can inform a lot of it. Now, I'm learning this 3 kids deep, trying to fucking have these conversations and think, but that's the common theme that's coming through for me.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't want to do this, but I have to keep this on time. We've got about 9 minutes left.
Let's go.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you some, not quick fire, we'll have a little bit of space to explore them, but some questions that I think would be interesting to the listener, now having your perspective on parenting as a whole.
Yeah.
Is there anything specific you have learned about yourself? Because you knew a lot going in, but since having your child, can we say his name? Are you okay, Sharon?
Yeah, Arthur. Yeah.
Since having Arthur, is there anything that you've learned about yourself?
I never knew. Yeah, I knew, like, I would always say to people, I'm not nice, but I'm kind. Right? So I'm not I'll be a dickhead, but I if I saw you walking home in the rain, I'm going to put in and pick you up and bring you home. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. I didn't know how deep emotions could go. Like in my adult life, when I was younger, sure, like everyone's kind of a bit of an emotional wreck when they're a teenager. But like, I never realized, like I said at the beginning, like I always felt like I was between, 7 and 4. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
But like, Jesus Christ, like it's overwhelming. The feelings of like genuine love are overwhelming. You know what I mean? Or like, we have to, when you bring them for their like injections and all, and the baby like cries, my heart breaks. I have to hold his leg. So, cause he's getting strong now, you know what I mean? And it's for their own good and all that sort of shit. But like, Jesus Christ, it's so tough to, like, it's the best way I've ever heard explained. It's a piece of yourself that is out in the world. You know what I mean? You just worry about them all the time. You think about them all the time. You want to know what they're doing all the time. Like, and Katie would tell you, I'm like a pest. Like, if she is like, she'd taken, like, her family live down the country, like, so she'll go head down home and she'll set up like the camera on him when he's asleep so she can keep an eye on him. But like, I'll be like, he'll wake up and I'll text like, he's awake. Or like, they were in the bed together, just cuddling, but I thought she was asleep, but I was like, he's in the bed with you. Don't fucking roll over on it. She's like, I'm awake. Like, I know I'm being a dickhead. I know I'm being a pest, but it's so hard feeling so vulnerable about something you can't do anything about. You know what I mean? So, like, Jesus, there's been time he's woken up, and so where we lie in bed, like, I'm on like the far side of the bed, and his crib is over near Katie. I have like vaulted over her to get to him quick. You know what I mean? When he starts crying, I'm like, fuck you, I'll get him. You know what I mean? It's mad to feel that like that invested in like this extension of yourself, essentially. Like, he's not like a little me, he's his own guy, but
yeah.
I didn't know it would feel that way. I didn't know I would care that much. I knew I would care. I knew I'd love him, but I didn't know it would be this profound.
That's amazing. I would also add to that, it's quite common. I've had conversations like this. I haven't necessarily felt like this, but I've had conversations like this where people struggle, men and women, mothers and fathers, struggle to feel that sense of deep connection and can feel huge guilt and shame attached to that. In my experience and from what I've listened to, a huge contributing factor to that is just not giving yourself enough space to actually feel that. It's probably there. That sense of connection is probably there for most people, but a lot of us have too much going on that we're not giving it space to actually feel it. We can't feel most things. You had a slightly different experience, as did I. I had this overwhelming feeling when my first child was born, and I regularly get, what if they get hit by a car? During fucking bed. I'm like, what if they get hit by a car? I would regularly get that. I do know a lot of people really struggle to feel that for a long time with children, if ever. And in my experience, just giving yourself a little bit more space to actually sit with that for a while and sit with yourself for a while without input and distraction can help that.
I don't want to extend the point, but I do know from talking to other dads, part of what they've, and this is not to call out moms, but sometimes mom and baby can be just come this bubble.
They're units, yeah.
And dad gets pushed out. So like one thing, and I can't speak to anyone else's experience, but I've been involved since the day she told me we were having a baby. And a lot, like, and I will say, like, I find, like, it's 21st century and people can still be very dismissive of dads. Very dismissive. Like, it's actually the most infuriating thing in the world. Like, it really fucking pisses me off. And I've had to like zip my lip a few times when we're out in public for the ways people will act or treat me. Like, this will be doctors, this will be people in shops. Very fucking annoying. But Katie's has facilitated my involvement from day one. I've gone to all the scans. I go to every doctor's appointment that I can go to around work. I am as involved as I can be. And she's such a proactive part of that and making sure I know when things are happening and what's happening. Where it'd be very easy just to just let it be her and him, and I'm just like
Yeah.
playing support in the background. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
so-
no, Jill did that for me. I had a similar experience, mixed, completely mixed. Some people were amazing. I specifically remember a couple of midwives and a couple of nurses, amazing. One doctor in particular, like, really made sure that I was a part of the process. Loads of eye contact, including me and everything, etc. And then there were a couple who were just cunts.
Yeah.
Like, fuck this guy. He's just the reason this happened, nothing else. And,
Yeah.
and I didn't even notice it some of the time. Jill picked up on it and had a massive problem with it.
Yeah.
And she backed me, like, so yeah, shout out to the ladies. I won't get into this. This is too big of a question to ask you right now, but have any of your existing beliefs, you mentioned this was a new kind of experience of love, but have any of your existing beliefs about anything been challenged by becoming a father?
I suppose, like, beliefs is a tough one. I think like what gives you a sense of fulfillment, that's definitely changed, because like I grew up, like I've mentioned in the previous podcast, I grew up very, very like not affluent, to be the nice way to say it. So like for a long time, I thought a lot of fulfillment would come from being extremely financially stable. And then after a point where I started to become financially stable, it would be like a bit of financial freedom where like I'm not trading all my time away for money. And I achieved that, like to a degree. Like, don't get me wrong, I am not rich by any means, or flush even. I'd say this is enough for me that I can support myself, Katie, and the baby. And run a business, which is a phenomenal position to be in. Yeah, like there's always like challenges to, you know, yourself. You don't have any security or safety net. And I thought that was like the pinnacle of like, not existence, but like I've done it. You know what I mean? I'm not beholden to anybody else except revenue. You know what I mean? But like I don't have to be anywhere or do anything that I don't want to do. I can run things myself. But then you experience things like your baby smiles at you for the first time. You know what I mean? Or when you're feeding them, when they start wanting to touch your face and things like that. Like, and you're like, you know what? Maybe running a business isn't the best thing in the world. Maybe this is just fucking phenomenal. It makes, do you know what? Like it's like you said, the experience is what you make it. Yeah, sitting up with them in the middle of the night when they're awake and they need a feed and you're wrecked. It can be shit. You're like, just go back to sleep. Or it's those precious little moments you have to bond with them. And that's like, I was like, you know what? Lifting 300 kilos is pretty sick, but this is pretty peak as well. This feels really good. So I think it's just changing my perspective of what like achievement is and what like fulfillment is. Yeah. If anything.
Yeah, that's important. Has it shifted your sense of identity at all?
Like, I'm a dad now, so obviously I wasn't a dad before and I am now.
So do you like, and it sounds weird to say, but do you identify as a dad? Is it part of who you are?
Yeah, it's very important that it is part of it, because like I think I mentioned earlier on, I don't like when people's entire existence just becomes being a parent.
Yeah.
You know, dad of 4 kids, you know what I mean? Or like, you know, whatever, fucking full-time mom, you know what I mean? It's like, great, that is a phenomenal achievement and you're doing a great job ideally, but like you are more than that thing, because one day you won't have little children anymore that are dependent on you for absolutely everything. And I think it's part of the process of having kids. Like obviously, like I'm very far away from it. You're still a good bit far away from it. Eventually your kids are going to find out that you're just a person.
Yeah, a flawed person.
Yeah, well, we all are.
Yeah.
So what type of person you want your kids to find out that you are?
It's gas. That's actually fucking the last question. You fucker. How did you get that? That was literally, I was like, this is the one I want to ask here. But it was, and you teed it up nicely there as well, because I was thinking, sometimes I think to myself, right, I'm sitting here talking and all this shit. One day, my kid will be on a podcast talking about how shit of a dad I was, how fucked up our life. If Arthur is sitting on a podcast in 30 years' time, what would he say about you? What would you like him to say about you? They're 2 different questions. So I'll ask the second one. What would you like Arthur to be sitting, having a conversation like that, mid-30s, what would you like him to be saying about you in the context of he has just become a dad?
That while I worked hard, I never made him feel like he was a nuisance or like a distraction or less important than what I was doing. That would be important to me. And that like if we're talking idealistically, I'd love for me to have been some form of a role model, or like not necessarily a hero, but somebody that if I turned out similar to my dad in his work ethic or his love for people around him, that would be a good thing. I'd obviously prefer him to be significantly better than me, but that he grew up knowing that he was loved, and that a lot of the things I do in life are motivated towards making sure he has the best childhood that I can physically give him, and that he was best prepared for the big bad world as I can physically make them.
That's lovely. I think a lot of the people who wanted to give you a slap earlier on want to give you a hug now. They've seen the softer side of Ian. I have to bring you back on to do this again because I've left so many stones unturned. But before we wrap this one up, because I feel like I haven't done this enough justice. I think there's some beautiful parts in there, but I'd love to go deeper in some of these elements because it's so fundamental to who we are now at the moment. But before we go, would you read me that piece?
Absolutely.
From The Daily Dad by
So this is, it's like the first part of the book, right? And actually, I'll need to find who wrote it, right? But I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called A Little Fellow Follows Me.
No.
So I'll read it to you. It's called A Little Fellow Follows Me. And the poem goes, a careful man I want to be. A little fellow follows me. I do not dare to go astray, for fear he'll go the self-same way. I cannot once escape his eyes. Whate'er he sees me do, he tries. Like me, he says he's going to be the little chap who follows me. He thinks that I am good and fine, believes in every word of mine. The base in me he must not see, the little chap who follows me. I must remember as I go, through summer sun and winter snow, I'm building for the years to be that little chap who follows me.
Oh, don't show me the fucking picture, man. Fucking hell. Jesus.
Yeah, it hits you a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, that fucking got me.
Yeah, it's tough because, like, I remember, especially being young, and childhood was very tough for me. In a lot of ways, my mom did an excellent job, but particularly, you mentioned earlier on, like, those formative years between, like, 0 and, let's say, 4, 5, 6, maybe. That was a very hard time in my life. Like, I remember it as some parts of it, and people were not nice. And it's like, you know, my mom could only do so much. She was trying to, like, provide for me and make sure I had things. And, like, you know, Celtic Tiger came and everything got a lot better. That was when I was like 7, 8, 9. But yeah, I remember, like, first, I can remember feeling like fear and shame a lot as a kid. And that was from other people. And I think I would bludgeon somebody if they did that to my child. So you have to, like, be... So I think it's so much more than just making sure they've clothes on their back and a bed to sleep in and a roof over their head. It's like, you can remember times in your life was just shit, things were bad, but you had your dad and you said your dad's a great guy. Like, and I know maybe you say in some ways maybe he did too much. That's probably better than having no one there though. So that hit me hard when I first read it. So yeah. I hope it hit you as well, and I hope it hit everybody else.
Fucking tearing my eye here, like, and thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful, man. And I agree with you. Yeah, I've said this before, and I just want to make sure I say it on air as much as I can now. Like, my dad is my hero, and I'm very lucky to have had that, and I'm very sad, I suppose, that your experience was like that. But both of those experiences and the fact that we've been able to share them with each other on this have informed how we want to raise our kids.
Yeah,
oh, man, Arthur's one lucky little fella. I'll tell you that for sure. Ian, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. We're going to continue this conversation. It's my fault I have to cut this one short. But I've really, really enjoyed it. And most importantly, I know I said this before from the bottom of my heart, because I said this before you had him, because I know and I knew. I think this is going to be the best thing for you, for Arthur, for Katie. It's so phenomenal. And sometimes when I listen to these podcasts, they're very personal development, growth. You should do this, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. This is a real human experience. I'm so grateful for you sharing that with us. And I'm genuinely so happy for you, man. Genuinely so happy. So congratulations. And yeah, I'll chat to you in the next one.
Chat to you in the next one.